On August 25th, 2026, the world lost a woman who had spent nearly 80 years making the impossible look effortless. Dolly Parton had survived poverty so deep that her family's one-bedroom cabin in the Tennessee mountains had no electricity and no running water. She had survived Nashville, a city that chewed up talented women and spit them out as someone else's backup act. She had walked away from one of the most important professional partnerships of her early career, at a time when walking away could have ended everything. She conquered country music, then she conquered Hollywood, then she built a business empire worth an estimated $450 million. Then she turned around and gave enormous portions of it away, more than 332 million free books sent to children around the world, millions of dollars poured into medical research, disaster relief, and education. She sold more than 100 million albums. She wrote approximately 3,000 songs. She built Dollywood into a tourism engine generating close to $2 billion a year for a region of Tennessee that had once been defined by the very poverty she grew up in. And even at 80 years old, she still had a Broadway musical in development, a hotel about to open, a museum being built, a biopic in the works, and unreleased music waiting in the vault. Then came the final chapter, a brief battle with cancer. Admission to Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center on August 21st, 4 days later, surrounded by the people she loved most, the woman who seemed incapable of slowing down was gone. Her family released a statement that captured what everyone already felt, a rhinestone life that shone bright enough for the world to see. How did a child raised in rural poverty become a global icon? Why did she risk leaving the man who helped make her famous? How did she survive after one of the biggest professional gambles in country music history? Why did Hollywood underestimate her? How did she turn her own image into a business empire? Why did she give so much of her wealth away? What losses shaped her final years? Why was she still planning new projects at 80? And what was happening behind the famous smile near the end? Dolly Parton's story was never simply a rise to fame. It was a lifetime of refusing to let circumstances decide how her story would end. Until, finally, there was one ending even Dolly couldn't rewrite. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a place called Locust Ridge, tucked into the mountains of Sevier County, Tennessee. She was the fourth of 12 children born to Robert Lee Parton and Avi Lee Caroline Parton, and the world she was born into was about as far from fame as a human being could get. The family lived in a one-bedroom log cabin, no electricity, no running water, no plumbing. 12 children and 2 parents sharing a space so small that the beds were stacked and the walls were papered with newspaper and old magazines to keep the cold out. The Country Music Hall of Fame describes the family as living in a remote cabin without plumbing or electricity. The Library of Congress recorded Dolly's own description of her childhood with 2 words: "I grew up poor, very poor." But poverty was not the only thing inside that cabin. Music was everywhere. Her mother, Avi Lee, sang constantly, old Appalachian ballads, gospel hymns, folk songs passed down through generations. She sang while cooking. She sang while tending the children. She sang the way other people breathe, naturally, continuously, without thinking about it. And her children absorbed every note. The Parton household was alive with music, even when the cupboards were bare. Dolly's father, Robert Lee, was a different kind of influence. He was smart. He was resourceful. He worked as a sharecropper, a farmer, a construction worker, any job he could find to feed 12 mouths. But he could not read or write, not a single word. And Dolly watched what that did to a man who was, by her own account, one of the wisest people she ever knew. "My dad was a very smart man," she later said while accepting the Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy, "and I often wondered what he could have done had he been able to read and write." So that is the inspiration. She was talking about the Imagination Library, the book gifting program she would create decades later. But the seed was planted here, in this cabin, watching a brilliant man navigate a world that required skills he never had the chance to learn. Dolly started writing songs at 5 years old. Her first composition was about a corncob doll her mother had made for her. She called it Little Tiny Tasseltop. She could not read or write either, not yet, so her mother wrote down the lyrics as the tiny blonde girl sang them out loud. She fashioned a microphone from a tobacco stick and a tin can. She stood on the front porch of that cabin and sang to the chickens, the trees, and the mountains, imagining she was performing at the Grand Ole Opry. She was 5 years old, and she was already rehearsing for a life that no one around her believed was possible. She didn't know it yet, but the things her family couldn't afford would eventually become the things she spent millions helping other children obtain. By the time she was 10, Dolly was performing on local radio and television shows in Knoxville, the nearest city with broadcasting equipment. Her uncle Bill Owens, a songwriter himself, recognized something extraordinary in his niece. He bought her a guitar. He drove her to Nashville. He introduced her to anyone who would listen, and people listened. At 13 years old, an age when most children are worrying about school dances, Dolly Parton stood on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry for the first time. It was July 25, 1959. The legendary Johnny Cash himself introduced her. She sang "You Gotta Be My Baby" with her Uncle Bill accompanying her. The audience gave her three encores at 13. She graduated from Sevier County High School in 1964, the first person in her family to earn a diploma. And the very next day, she packed her belongings and moved to Nashville. Not the next week, not after the summer, the next day. On her first day in town, she walked to a laundromat called the Wishy Washy to do her laundry. A young man named Carl Dean was standing outside. He was 21, she was 18, and by her own account, that was the day her real life began. They married 2 years later and remained together for nearly 60 years. But on that first day in Nashville, Dolly Parton wasn't thinking about romance. She was thinking about music. She was thinking about the career she had been building since she was 5 years old, standing on a porch with a tin can microphone, singing to an audience of mountains. She briefly worked as a secretary before her music career took off, a job she would later draw on when Hollywood came calling. Most people dream about escaping poverty. Dolly started building the escape route herself, and Nashville was about to give her the opportunity that would make her famous, and the partnership that would eventually become the hardest thing she had to leave behind. In 1967, Porter Wagoner, one of the biggest names in country music, a Grand Ole Opry star, and the host of a nationally syndicated television variety show reaching 3 million viewers a week, invited a 21-year-old Dolly to join his program as his new girl singer. Wagoner's show reached nearly 100 television markets. For a young singer still looking for her national breakthrough, this was the golden ticket. For 7 years, Dolly appeared on the Porter Wagoner Show. They recorded 14 top 10 country duets together. Wagoner helped Dolly secure a deal with RCA Victor, the most prestigious label in Nashville. He served as her producer, arranger, and manager. It was, by every measurable standard, the most important professional relationship of her early career. But there was a problem growing inside that partnership. Dolly was outgrowing Porter Wagoner. Her solo records were gaining traction. Her songwriting was getting sharper, more personal, more ambitious. She was writing songs like Coat of Many Colors, a deeply autobiographical piece about her mother sewing a coat from rags that proved she was not simply a girl singer standing next to a man in a rhinestone suit. She was an artist. And artists, by their nature, need to control their own work. She had agreed to stay with Porter for 5 years. She stayed for 7, and by the end, she knew with absolute certainty that if she didn't leave, she would spend the rest of her career being someone else's supporting act. But convincing Porter proved extraordinarily difficult. He saw her departure as betrayal. She saw it as survival. So she did what Dolly Parton always does when words aren't enough. She wrote a song. "I Will Always Love You" was not a romantic breakup ballad, despite what millions of people would later assume, especially after Whitney Houston's volcanic cover version in 1992. The song was written as a farewell to a professional partner. It was Dolly's way of saying, "I love you, I'm grateful for everything you've given me, and I have to go." She brought the finished song to Porter and sang it for him directly. According to Dolly, he cried, and for the first time he didn't argue. The song reached #1 on the country chart in 1974. That same year, Dolly left the show and stepped into the uncertainty of a solo career. Wagoner filed a $3 million lawsuit in 1979, claiming breach of contract. The relationship was damaged for years, but it eventually healed. In 2007, Dolly performed the song for Porter at the Grand Ole Opry during his 50th anniversary celebration, their final appearance together on that stage. 5 months later, she visited him in hospice on the day he died. She held his hand. They prayed. Porter's soul was already with God, she said. All that was left was a shell. What happened after she left Porter was not a gradual climb. It was an eruption. Jolene arrived, a song built around a single name, repeated with a desperation so raw that it transcended genre. The song was inspired by a real woman, a bank teller who had developed a crush on Carl Dean. Then came Here You Come Again in 1977, topping both the country and pop charts, hit after hit after hit, each one pulling a wider audience into Dolly's orbit. But here is what most people missed while they were watching the rhinestones sparkle. Dolly Parton owned her own publishing. In an era when most artists, especially female artists, signed away their songwriting rights, Dolly kept hers. She controlled I Will Always Love You. She controlled Jolene. She controlled Coat of Many Colors. Every time one of her songs was played, covered, or licensed, Dolly got paid. Not a label, not a manager, Dolly. When Elvis Presley wanted to record I Will Always Love You, his manager Colonel Tom Parker demanded half the publishing rights. Dolly said no. She walked away from one of the most high-profile covers in music history because she refused to give up ownership of her own song. Years later, when Whitney Houston's version became the best-selling single by a female artist in history, Dolly earned an estimated $10 million from the rights she had refused to surrender. That wasn't luck. That was a business decision made by a woman the industry kept treating like a novelty act. People looked at the rhinestones. Dolly was looking at the business. Then came Hollywood. Jane Fonda heard Two Doors Down on the radio and cast Dolly in 9 to 5, a comedy about three secretaries taking revenge on their sexist boss. Roger Ebert called her a natural-born movie star and said it was hard to believe it's her first film. The film became the second highest-grossing movie of 1980, earning over $100 million, beaten only by The Empire Strikes Back. Dolly had insisted on writing the theme song, 9 to 5 inches, hammered out on her acrylic nails because she didn't have an instrument on set, reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, earned an Academy Award nomination, and won 2 Grammys. She followed it with The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas alongside Burt Reynolds, earning a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress, and then Steel Magnolias in 1989 alongside Julia Roberts, Sally Field, and Shirley MacLaine, a film that proved she could handle dramatic material with the same authenticity she brought to comedy. Hollywood had expected the singer with the big hair to play a country stereotype. Dolly turned that stereotype into a weapon. She didn't abandon her country identity for Hollywood. She brought it with her, and the industry that had expected a curiosity got a force of nature instead. But her biggest move wasn't a movie or a song. It was something she would actually own. In 1986, Dolly opened Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, a theme park built in the Smoky Mountains where she had grown up barefoot. She co-owned it with a 50% stake. The first year, 1.3 million visitors came. By 2026, Dollywood had become the #1 attraction in Tennessee, drawing 4 million visitors a year, generating close to $2 billion in annual economic impact and creating more than 23,000 jobs in Sevier County. She built a replica of her childhood cabin inside the park. Her brother Bobby constructed it. Her mother designed the interior. A sign outside read, "These mountains and my childhood home have a special place in my heart. They inspire my music and my life." The park didn't try to erase Appalachia. It celebrated it. The food, the crafts, the cinnamon bread, the handmade goods, the music that filled every corner of the grounds. Dollywood wasn't simply a theme park. It was an economic transformation of an entire region. The Pigeon Forge city manager later said, "I think Dollywood and Pigeon Forge kind of grew up together." Sevier County's tourism director was more direct. Dolly Parton is Sevier County's tourism economy. The girl who grew up with almost nothing had built something that could outlive her. But while Dolly's empire was growing, her private world was changing in ways the public couldn't see. For nearly 60 years, the most private thing about the most public woman in America was her marriage. Carl Dean almost never appeared in public. He attended one industry event early in their marriage and told Dolly afterward, "Don't ever ask me to go to another one of these damn things because I ain't going." She never asked again. Carl ran an asphalt paving business. He preferred his farm, his privacy, and his wife's company to anything the entertainment industry could offer. On March 3, 2025, Carl Thomas Dean died in Nashville at 82. Dolly said he had suffered a great deal. She told a reporter, "I'm at peace that he's at peace, but that don't keep me from missing him and loving him." Then she said the thing that mattered most. "It's a hole in my heart, but we'll fill that up with good stuff and he'll still always be with me." Days later, at Dollywood's 40th anniversary celebration, she showed up anyway and told the crowd, "Of course I will always love him and I'll miss him, but I wanted you to know that I will always love you." For decades, Dolly could go home and leave the celebrity behind. After Carl's death, the world she returned to was different, yet Dolly didn't stop. She turned even more of her attention toward what would remain after her. In 1995, she had launched the Imagination Library, a program that sends one free book every month to every child from birth to age 5. It started in Sevier County, inspired by her father's illiteracy. By 2026, it had distributed more than 332 million free books across 5 countries, mailing more than 3 million books every single month. In 1988, she had established the Dollywood Foundation, whose buddy program cut dropout rates at Sevier County schools from 35% to 6%. In 2016, after wildfires destroyed homes across the Smoky Mountains, she created the My People Fund and distributed more than $12 million. In 2020, she donated $1 million to Vanderbilt University for COVID-19 research, funding that directly contributed to the Moderna vaccine. When fans called it the Dolly vaccine, she deflected, "I got more credit than I deserved. I was just trying to put my money where my heart is." She gave another $1 million to Vanderbilt for pediatric research. She gave $1 million to the Boys and Girls Club. She matched her personal $1 million Hurricane Helene donation with another $1 million from her businesses. And threaded through everything, from the childhood cabin to the billions generated by Dollywood to the hundreds of millions of books, was the quiet echo of a father who couldn't read and a daughter who never forgot. In her final months, Dolly was not winding down, she was accelerating. Her team revealed after her death a staggering list of projects. The Broadway musical, Dolly, a true original, with previews beginning December 2026, an opening night set for January 19, 2027, her 81st birthday. A Songteller Hotel, a Life of Many Colors museum, a biopic, a docuseries, a scripted series, an animated show, a coffee brand, a jewelry collaboration, dog treats, dolls, travel stops celebrating truck drivers. Her manager said, "Dolly worked up until the day she died. She loved seeing her dreams come to life." At Dollywood's anniversary in March 2026, she told fans she'd been worn down and worn out from grief and health issues. Then she grinned and said, "I think Carl Dean's waiting for me. If I should show up at the pearly gates with somebody else, he would not like that. He'd be saying, 'Who's that little pisser? You leave him outside the gates.'" Then the word everyone eventually has to hear arrived: cancer. She was admitted to Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center on August 21, 2026. 4 days later, on Monday, August 25th, at the age of 80, she was gone. Her nephew Brian Seaver confirmed the news in an emotional video. Her family said she died peacefully in Nashville, surrounded by loved ones. The Grand Ole Opry held a tribute that evening. Rhonda Vincent performed Coat of Many Colors, while a screen behind her read, "Remembering Dolly Parton 1946, 2026." Tributes arrived from Beyoncé and Sabrina Carpenter, from Pedro Pascal, from presidents, from children's librarians who had spent years distributing her books. Vanderbilt Health said, "It's not an exaggeration to say that Dolly has helped save countless lives through her philanthropy." For decades, Dolly had appeared capable of solving every problem life threw at her. Money, she built businesses. Fame, she controlled it on her own terms. Criticism, she turned it into fuel. Poverty, she created institutions to fight it. Loss, she kept writing. But cancer does not negotiate. It does not care about publishing rights, or charitable foundations, or Broadway openings. It does not respond to charm, or determination, or a tin can microphone on a porch in the mountains. Dolly had spent her whole life solving problems. This was the one problem that couldn't be solved.
The story is called The Rise and Fall of Dolly Parton. And at this point you might be wondering, where exactly was the fall? She never lost her audience. She never lost her relevance. She never went bankrupt.
She was never canceled, forgotten, or pushed aside. In the year she died, she had more projects in development than most entertainers have in an entire career. So what fell? Her body, time, mortality. The fall was the one limitation that no amount of talent, ambition, or generosity can overcome. Dolly Parton did not fall from the top. She reached the top, built something larger than the top, and eventually had to leave it. That is a different kind of tragedy, quieter, more universal, and ultimately more profound than a scandal or a failure. She just made better use of the time she had than almost anyone who has ever lived. Return to the beginning. A little girl in a one-room cabin, 12 children, no electricity, no running water, a father who couldn't read, a mother who sang every song she knew, a tobacco stick, a tin can, a porch overlooking the Smoky Mountains. From there, Nashville, a laundromat, a boy named Carl, Porter Wagoner's television show, 7 years of learning, growing, and beginning to feel the walls close in. Then I Will Always Love You, a goodbye disguised as a love song, a leap into the unknown. Then Jolene, Coat of Many Colors, 9 to 5, songs that belong to the world because the woman who wrote them refused to sell them to anyone else. Then Hollywood, then Dollywood, then 332 million books, then 60 years with Carl, and then August 25th, 2026, her songs are still playing. Her businesses are still running. Her Broadway musical is still opening. Her hotel is still welcoming guests. Her museum is still being built. Her books are still being mailed, 3 million a month, to children in 5 countries, arriving in mailboxes with a simple message that Dolly once described as the core of everything she believed: dream big dreams and learn everything you can. Her manager said she left behind a project roadmap that will guide us for decades to come. Her legacy wasn't left to chance. It was engineered, lovingly and deliberately, by a woman who understood that the most important thing she could build was something that didn't need her to survive. Dolly Parton's story wasn't really a rise and fall. It was a rise, followed by a lifetime of refusing to stop. Dolly Parton couldn't stop time, but she did something almost as remarkable. She filled 80 years with so much music, love, and generosity that her story was never going to end when she did.